Welcome back, Caniacs. This is the Caniac Chronicles, Season 1, Episode 24. It is March 17th at about 9:50 p.m. at night. The Columbus game just wrapped up. You can't see, but I'm actually celebrating, St. Patrick's Day. I got my green screen behind me here. We're all festive and stuff. Tough night. Tough night for the Hurricanes. The agenda tonight is really going to be talking briefly about really the lull that we're seeing here in the season for Carolina. Specifically, tonight I think it was the biggest eyesore, especially given the fact that Bussy is in net, and this is probably his worst showing so far this season as a goalie. Tough, tough for the team, tough for him. They got to pick up, they got to move on. But we'll discuss kind of the month of March here for games. And then later, we will discuss the trade deadline and sort of how I feel about that, how I feel, how good or bad I feel this trade deadline went this season. And we'll talk a little bit about, the player that they managed to pick up in the trade deadline tonight, specifically because he had sort of one of the only roles coming from Carolina tonight. But anyways, without further ado, the lull of March. March has been a tough month for Carolina. So far, they have played 8 games, and they are now 4-4, excuse me, including a shootout win against Pittsburgh. It's been tough. It's been tough to watch the Hurricanes this month. They started out on the 2nd of March in Seattle. That game, that whole week I had some sort of long, short distant travel for work. So I was getting up pretty early each morning that week and missing, I would say, a good chunk or staying up as much as I could, but missing at least a portion of each of those games. Specifically with Seattle, I remember it very vividly because I remember going to bed or getting in bed after the second period, down 2-1 still. I was just happy that they managed to end the shutout. And so going to bed there in the third period, I was fully ready for them to, for whatever was going to happen. And, sure enough, I wake up, check the score immediately, and it's 2-1. So, the first thought that comes to my head is, well, I didn't miss anything, and I'm glad, I didn't stay up for it. That would have been a pretty frustrating extra 45 minutes to commit. But they bounce right back. 2 days later, they visit Vancouver. They blow their doors off 6-4. And then similarly, 2 days later again in Edmonton, they blow their doors off 6-3. So those are 2 big wins on that West Coast trip. Really, anytime your team goes on a West Coast, or if you're a West Coast team coming to the East, anytime your team goes on that opposite coast trip, all you can really ask for from them is to split the points. If they can split the points at least, that is basically a win in terms of the analytics and how the analytics go. Because every team is going to have to end up facing it. And, a 50-50 split is really as good as it gets. It's a grueling trip no matter which coast you're going to, but especially for those East Coast teams going out to the West, the distance between, they're a lot more spread out in the West. So I would assume that is probably a bit more grueling for the East Coast players going to the West Coast. And surely, Carolina shows that they have that back-to-back. The day after Edmonton, on Saturday, they have to play Calgary, and they fall to Calgary 5-4. They do end up scoring an empty net goal, but they were down by 2 at the time. So they just couldn't get that last one to go and tie it up and send it to overtime. Unfortunate, but they do bounce back. They win this game, at home on the 10th against Pittsburgh. It goes to a shootout. Had the added benefit of not having Crosby or Malkin in that game. Crosby's been out with that injury from, I believe it was from the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken, from Radko Gudas, who has, committed his crime again on Austin Matthews with that knee-to-knee kind of blowing Matthews' knee out. It was a pretty significant injury. It was, what was it? I think it was a grade 3 MCL tear or something. I don't know what that means. I'm not a doctor, but it doesn't sound good, and I know anything with an MCL or an ACL is definitely not good in terms of probably pain factor for sure, but also short term recovery. Those are generally longer term recovery periods, and some of them are even career ending. It's not all too long ago. Those were pretty career ending injuries, depending on what sport you played. But nonetheless, Carolina walks away with that win in a shootout. And then they move on to St. Louis on that Thursday, and it was a tough loss. St. Louis has had our number all season long, if I'm not mistaken, and I am fairly certain that I am still not mistaken. St. Louis is the only team who has shut the Hurricanes out this season, and I do believe we have lost every game of that series this year as well. And I also think that actually kind of makes them the only team that we haven't been able to beat this season in terms of the season series. Although we'll see more from Columbus. We still got to get a win against Columbus, if I'm not mistaken. But we've got at least one more game against them. Oh no, we did have a win in December. Tripp kept mentioning it tonight. And then after St. Louis, the boys bounce back. They go down to Florida and kind of put the shellacking, I guess, on Tampa Bay. Tampa was really clawing and gnawing at that game, trying to get into it, trying to do their usual. Florida is very big on this too, and Boston in the past has been big on this. And it works. It works on Carolina. There's a reason why they're big on this. But getting that nagging, those button pushing players out on the ice to try and start something with us, the guys did a very good job of just leaving that as it was and focusing on the scoreboard above them. And so they come out with a good, a solid 4-2 win on that game, which I do believe included an empty netter from someone to sort of seal the deal and give you that 2-point cushion. But that was a big game. Martinook had a really big game. That was the road trip for the Moms, and Martinook always has a pretty big game for the Moms. So glad to see him score. And I believe Jankowski opened the scoring up on that one too. So it was just a really good game to see those guys scoring, because they weren't just scoring goals, which they don't always do, but they were scoring them on one of the best goalies in the entire NHL, in the world really, for goaltending in Vasilevsky. So that was good to see. And then that brings us to tonight against Columbus, and it's a tough game to see them lose to Columbus. Jarvis unfortunately takes 2 sets of double minor penalties for high sticking, both of them very inadvertent. The first one really early in the game on Zach Rowensky, which ends up resulting in a goal against about a minute later, give or take probably 5 or 10 seconds. So, and then, really there's just the refs tonight were, I could go on and on about the refs in this league, and I believe I have at certain points, but to kind of just leave it as it is, the refs just had no interest tonight in really, giving Carolina anything in terms of leniency on calls, and that's not on the high sticks, those are black and white calls, but in terms of leniency or, calling something against Columbus, Tripp spoke about it relentlessly, and I get it. It's stuck in his mind because it was stuck in mine too, but you just got to push it out. That third goal against us, go back and watch it. There's a blatant trip call missed trip call, on Bussy as he goes behind the net to play that puck, unfortunately. Fortunately, we do see Svechnikov, pot one there in the second period after the Nick Delorier fight. That was what I wanted to talk about. So Nick Delorier, first game as a Carolina Hurricane tonight. We did think we were going to see him, I believe, in the Tampa Bay game, I guess, unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. Maybe Rod made a game-time decision. But anyways, regardless, tonight against Columbus is his first game as a Hurricane. He was an obvious presence out there, and I'm not just talking about the fight, but his hits. He's looking to hit. He's looking to hit hard. He's looking to hit really any moment he can, and it was nice to see. And then about really right at the halfway point of the game, just about 10 minutes left in the second period, he ends up dropping the gloves with Olivier, and another known fighter, another known enforcer, and it was great. It was really good to see. I think we all knew it was coming. I think it was something that has been talked about a lot since that trade was made. It's a guy who has that reputation around the league. This is his 13th year in the league. And, that's a guy that is well known across the league for being that type of enforcer, for being that kind of guy. And quite frankly, Carolina needs a little bit of that, for sure, especially come postseason. We don't want to see this team getting pushed around and have no bite back. That's really what Nick Delorier brings to the table. He had a really good tilt there. Neither guy really had any sort of off-balancey type, momentum. They both were really solid on their skates, almost like they were boxers, and they were there for a fight instead of I went to see a fight and a hockey game broke out kind of thing. But those two had a really, really good fight, really good tilt. He did have a pretty messed up hand after the fact, but later on, while he's still serving his 5-minute major for fighting, Aho takes an offsetting penalty after a cross check, down near the goal line, and then the retaliation also gets called as a roughing. And then while the two of them are in the box together, we do see Svechnikov with a phenomenal pass from Ehlers. As they enter the zone, he turns on that and converts it for the goal. So happy to see that they were at least able to prevent the shutout. It's only happened once this season, and it was against St. Louis on the road. So I just hope to see that trend continue at least throughout the year. There aren't many games left. You need to do that. But then talking about kind of how so they're 4-4 on this month of March here. Not the greatest, showing for Carolina in their last 9 games. Specifically in their last 10, I do believe they fall. So they're now 6-4 in their last 10 on a losing streak of 1. But here's the fact, it's been a very grueling season. Let's not shy away from that. Due to the Olympics, for 5 of these guys, it's been very grueling because they played through the Olympics. For the entire team, it's tough because of the sheer number of games condensed into that playing time that they've needed to play is a lot. It's taxing. They had they mentioned it on the broadcast tonight. Tonight was the first game of their 12th set of back-to-backs this season. And there was one just earlier in the week, about a week and a half ago, Friday the 6th and Saturday the 7th. And they're on the road, Edmonton, Calgary, for that back-to-back. It's tough. You can see that it's kind of taxing on the guys. Bussy was not having the best night tonight, probably the first real game that he has sort of seen this type of struggle, this type of frustration, this type of just not having your game all there and it really showing up for you. But he also didn't really have any goal support either. So, he doesn't have that to lean back on tonight. And so, unfortunately, the margins were just so thin. And, on top of all of that, I know I just keep listing everything here, like off the top of my head as it comes, but this is just what it's about. I do this on the fly. I hope you enjoy it. A lot of these teams that they're playing right now are clawing their way. They're desperately fighting for these points to put them into a playoff position. Columbus especially, Seattle especially. I want to say Calgary, St. Louis, I believe, is on the cusp. Pittsburgh is in right now, but doesn't have a whole lot of leg room. It's a free-for-all for these playoff points. And you don't want to be left back in the dust. There's only about 15 games left, depending on what team you are. So give or take, you've got about 30 points left to accumulate. And if you're still sitting in the 60s or the low 70s, you absolutely need every one of those 30 points to get yourself a playoff spot, because, depending on what league it is, around 80 is usually probably around the lowest you'll see that make the playoffs. But 85, 90, depending on how competitive the conference is, it might take that, to get in. So we'll see. We'll see what happens for those folks. Fortunately for Carolina, we are not vying for that playoff spot. We are all but clinched for a playoff spot at this point in time. So we can kind of have these games happen. We can learn from them. Rod is a really good coach where, this game is definitely going to be talked about. They're going to be briefed on it. They're going to be given a lot of feedback and video footage to look at. But it's going to end at that. And it's only going to be called back upon if, you're in a similar situation down the line when the games really matter more than just the playoff points. I'm talking about when you're playing in a 7-game series. So, just hope Carolina can move forward from this one. It was a tough loss tonight. Fortunately, it was on the road. You're coming back home tomorrow, to face Pittsburgh. I will be at that game. That's, why I happen to be recording now instead of tomorrow. So I fully expect him to have a really big bounce back game tomorrow. Malkin will be back in the lineup. Crosby, I do believe, will still be out, so you'll have some leverage there over this team. You just got to put a good game together. Unfortunately, I imagine Freddie Anderson will be in net tomorrow night, so I don't have high hopes for that one, but hey, maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe he did have a fairly good game recently against Tampa. Was it against Tampa? He had a good game recently. I forget which game it was. Let me just check to see if in fact it was this game against Tampa Bay. Let's see here. We've got the box score. We've got Freddie Anderson. Yeah. So Freddie Anderson does put up, an 895 save percentage that game. It was a pretty solid game for him. I know that to be true. I remember watching that game. He did get bailed out, though, by Sean Walker, and the rest of the team had a couple of big saves to help him out. But nonetheless, the Canes get it done. Freddie Anderson has a fairly decent game. Let's hope he can put another one together tomorrow night against Pittsburgh. That is, if he is in net. Who knows, maybe Rod will throw it to Bussy to give him a chance to bounce back quick. We shall see. Going back to Nick Delorier and the trade deadline. So we've got a lot to talk about. I think a lot of people were expecting a lot more from Carolina. To be quite honest, I think I was expecting quite a lot from really everyone in the league. There was not too much of a big splash here and there. I think the two biggest names in question were Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid. Neither of those players decided to, pack up their bags and move elsewhere, or at least their franchises didn't choose to do so. Would have been interesting to see where they would have gone had they choose to move on, but they do not. It was a pretty lackluster trade deadline. I think there's sort of two things happening there. I think number one, we say this, hockey critics, hockey analysts, they say it every year. If you're going to be a buyer at the deadline, you are going to be overpaying for a player. No matter who you pick, no matter who you trade for, you're likely to be overpaying. And the reason being, it's a seller's market at the trade deadline. It's the last chance for a team who thinks that they have everything they need, but that one little piece, or it's that team who's ready to start early on their rebuild for the upcoming season. It's their chance. It's their last chance to take one big swing before the trade deadline hits, and we have to wait until the off season to find a deal, to make a deal. And for that reason, I think there was a lot of GMs this year, on top of that, I think a lot of GMs this year really like the teams that they have. You look at Buffalo, you look at Tampa. Tampa has had a very good, recoil in terms of having a down season at first. They did pick up Corey Perry. They brought him back into a Lightning uniform, so we'll see where that goes. But even Anaheim, uh, Vegas is the only one that I can really think of and that is in the playoff run who I would have maybe have thought would have had a bigger move to make, but they have a pretty loaded salary cap too, between Eichel and Marner and Stone, and there is no loophole this season. So what do you know? Vegas can't really put things together. We'll see how it goes in the playoffs, but Vegas is struggling. The first year they closed that loop. What a shocker. Florida too, and Edmonton really never abused it, but Florida too. We're more than likely not going to see Florida in this postseason, which is big for Carolina. But hey, nonetheless, let's go back to Carolina. I think there was a lot of first of all, there was a lot of rumors in terms of potential trades, potential players, potential teams. I mean, there was so much talk there going into that trade deadline, and it really all started this past off season. I think was when the first rumors I saw were going around. A lot of chatter around potentially bringing Trocheck back. That didn't end up happening. Carolina ultimately really doesn't do much of anything this postseason or this deadline, this trade deadline. I think a lot of critics were very critical of that. Specifically the Spit and Chicklets. I believe they had a brief segment talking about it, where they really expect everything from Carolina this postseason now. You're not. They sort of say you're not making any moves at the deadline, while you're really kind of putting your jackpot into the middle of the poker table. You're all in. You're all in with what you have. So now more than ever, the pressure has been on for Carolina to get over the hump. Like I said, Florida will not be in the playoff. Will more than likely not be in the playoffs this season. You have that monkey off your back. Boston is, I'll say, a shell of itself from when they were really owning and dominating you in the postseason in the last 10 years or so. And Tampa really isn't, the same team that they once were during that dynasty type run in the early 2020s. So all systems go for Carolina. This is the year to really put it together and make it to the finals and face a Western team for once in the postseason in recent time. I really hope it happens. What Carolina did get this postseason from the trade deadline, Nick Delorier, a very tough player. The guy's got tattoos on his wrist, on his hand. Obviously, with tonight, he's not afraid to drop the gloves and beat up those knuckles a bit and get rough and rugged. And to be honest, I mean, you didn't give anything up. You basically gave nothing up. You gave up a conditional 2027 NHL draft pick. I want to say maybe the fourth round. But regardless, that's not a pick you need. That's not a pick that's really going to make or break this franchise. So you're essentially giving nothing away to get Nick Delorier. And all he does is he adds more depth. So he's another forward that is going to give them, more leeway in terms of who can or needs to get rest, especially come postseason. He's the kind of guy who you can, put out there to really sort of like Radko Gudas. Get out there and just start laying the body. And when the postseason starts, I guarantee we will see him doing that relatively frequently. And what usually comes of that in the postseason, when players like that start playing that type of physical game and really laying the body and leaving their physical mark on the opponent, well, it often translates into just kind of goals that happen through, chippy plays or broken plays or even garbage goals, you could say. But all of it results in a goal on the scoreboard, and that's all that matters once the postseason starts. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think in terms of the roster, I am more than glad that the Canes chose to do nothing in terms of a big splash, okay? The reason being is I'm sure Nikishin was a regular ask from our competition around the league when asking about any one of their players. I imagine any sort of player that we threw out that had better than average notoriety, better than average stats around the league, I almost guarantee Nikishin was the price for almost every one of them, more than likely. And that's not a player I'm really willing to give up at this point in time. He's just starting to find his game with this team. I think he's really enjoying his time in the States now, and specifically with this team. And it's showing out there on the ice. He's taking more shots, he's laying more hits, he's making really, really good plays. He had a fantastic play tonight on that third goal that I mentioned. Go back and watch the third goal. You'll see the missed tripping call on Heinen against Bussy behind the net, but you'll also see the puck kind of squirt out to a guy who's got a wide open net and who comes in to block it, and he blocks it with his hand. It's Nikishin, and he almost is able to scoop the puck back to himself to prevent the second shot. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and that's the one that goes in. But he's playing a really, really good game. He has a really, really heavy shot. He's a very smart player on defense. He's like the full package. If I haven't said that yet on this channel, I'll say it right now. And even if I have, I'll say it again. He is the full package in terms of a defenseman, and I love watching him play. And we have him now. We have him early. We have him while he's still cheap. I say keep him and see what becomes of it. If he really is that player that's worth that level of a trade, then he'll be worth that level of a trade down the road. And then you can make it then and, have maybe different pieces to the puzzle. So regardless, I'm kind of belaboring the point. Ultimately, my point being is not doing anything is not the worst thing that this franchise and Tulski could have done. I think you're going to kick yourself harder down the road for overpaying now instead of being patient, not making a big move right now, and instead just picking up a really good utility, plumber, electrician type of player who's out there, who's willing to lay his body, literally his body on the line and his knuckles, and he's really out there to set a tone and send a message, to the opponents that, any sort of any sort of instigation or unwarranted, physicality on our good players, on our top players, any type of behavior like that, and it's Nick Delorier you're gonna have to answer to. So I really appreciate that. I'm glad that they didn't make a big splash move. I'm glad that they kind of kept it pretty conservative. I think it's really going to pay dividends come postseason. I think it's going to pay more dividends than a big splash type of move would have. We'll see. Hope Kochetkov comes back and is making it. Will make a recovery and make a return for the postseason. If you can get him back, I think you have a really good tandem there between Bussy and Kochetkov. And if you're all out desperate, you can go to the veteran, Freddie Anderson, and lean on him if you'd like. But I do think the goaltending tandem between Bussy and Kochetkov could and will be huge come postseason. The defense is just rock solid all the way through. And the forwards is just, there is so much depth. And it's not just scoring depth, but you have so much depth in terms of, there's a certain set of guys that absolutely have to be healthy scratched every game because of how many players you're carrying right now in the forwards category. So, and a lot of them are really good players. Robinson back in the lineup, he can score goals. Kokiniemi, same thing. I know he struggles. I know the points, the stats aren't there to back it, but he's a good enough player to score when he has a chance. And again, he is, other than Nick Delorier, who has now recently been added to the team, he's one of the only guys out there who can and will lay the body and lay the boom when it's warranted. So lots to come for Carolina. There is, again, there is about 14. How many games are left? Let me just have it for sure. So they've played 66. Yeah, so there's 14 games left. Again, Carolina has all but clinched a playoff spot at this point. You got an 11-point lead on Columbus, who is the next closest team, but is not in the playoffs. And Carolina can easily keep pace enough to eventually clinch. They'll probably have it clinched in maybe I would say easily within 10 games. I think maybe 9-10 games from now it'll be a different conversation. But let's look at the schedule ahead for Carolina. We see them. Oh shoot, I lost the page. I'm a mess today. I've been really out of practice. I do apologize. Last week or couple weeks ago, the last episode I posted, I had some major video difficulties. Inadvertently, I lost all the video footage shortly before I went to upload it to my phone Photos app. So that'll be the first thing I do when we end this stream here. But okay, so the rest of the month of March, we've got Pittsburgh tomorrow. We've got Toronto on Friday. That's an away game. Then we're back in Pittsburgh at 3 p.m. on Sunday. We're going back into Canada to play Montreal on the 24th. Don't know why they couldn't have got that game in while they were up in Toronto, but okay. And then they'll have about 3 days off before they play a back-to-back on the weekend of the 28th with New Jersey and Montreal on the 29th. And then they'll close the month off on the road with Columbus at 7:30. That'll be the ESPN game, so that'll be a good national game that anybody can watch. All right, and with that, I will bid the cast adieu. But I do appreciate everyone listening. I do appreciate the patience in the last couple of weeks. My life has been very, very busy. Work, personal, etc., all the above. But I do appreciate the patience. I am trying to get back here on a more regular schedule for you guys. And yeah, I just appreciate any type of viewership I get out there. So anyways, regardless, have a great rest of your day, folks. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Go Canes!